From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
If. For such a small word, it packs a wallop. If I live to 100, if Social Security isn't enough, if my heart gets broken, if she says yes. We believe if should never hold you back. If should be managed with a plan that builds on what you already have. Together, we can create a personal safety net, a launching pad for all those brilliant ifs in the middle of life. You can call on our expertise and get guarantees for the if in life. After all, we're MetLife.
How does an investment manager build portfolios to stand the test of time? At Franklin Templeton, 60 years of investing through every kind of market has taught us to manage risk as vigilantly as we seek reward. This solid approach has made us a leading equity fund manager. Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
Ask your advisor for a full or summary prospectus with investment goals, risks, fees, expenses, and other information to read and consider carefully before investing.
Issue 1, Down Under.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister, for your generous welcome, your friendship, and your partnership. I am thrilled to be down under.
President Obama traveled this week to the Australian military base in Darwin on Australia's northern coast. The president met there with Australia's Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, to salute the 60th anniversary of AUKUS, the Australian-New Zealand-United States Security Treaty. AUKUS came into being in 1951 as a mutual defense pact. An attack on one nation would trigger a retaliation by all 3 countries. The AUKUS commemoration came on top of a new military agreement between the U.S. and Australia. That agreement will deploy 2,500 U.S. Marines and U.S. naval ships to Darwin. The move is intended to counter the growing military presence of China.
Question. Was China's reaction to our announcement of the Marine base in Darwin, was it too strident a reaction for China, a putatively friendly trading partner, to have made, Pat?
John, the Chinese provoked our reaction by their stupidity and their belligerence. They have said that the American fleet must get out of the South China Sea, the East China Sea, the Straits of Taiwan, the Yellow Sea. They have frightened all these countries in Southeast Asia and even Japan and others who are now deciding maybe we don't want the Americans to go home. So Obama is marching into this opening, and this base in Australia is part of it. And what you've got is sort of a low-key Cold War beginning. But I will say this, the Chinese communists are themselves responsible for their stupidity. They are alienating virtually every neighbor they have.
How far away is China from Australia?
Oh, you got, I'd bet 3,000-4,000 miles. But let me tell you what China does.
How long would that take for one of our long-distance bombs?
Well, they got a new bomb that goes, you can get anywhere.
Never mind the bomb, if you wanted to carry.
They can go anywhere in an hour, a new bomb that can go anywhere in an hour.
Hey, Pat, do you remember how upset we became with the Russian fleet down off the coast of South America?
Well, look, John, we've had a seventh fleet in the Far East since the Cold War began. What are you talking about?
Well, Pat is right that the U.S. presence is welcome there in part because of China's growing power and the nervousness of everybody in that neighborhood. But I thought the Chinese statement was actually quite restrained. If China had brought 2,500 of its military personnel to South America, we would go ballistic in this country. So I think they appropriately had to say something. And I don't think either country wants a Cold War. And so I think the trading relationship between these two countries has to continue. China's a huge market. And I don't think the president intends to embark on a Cold War here. But he is asserting himself as the first Pacific president after a string of presidents whose ancestors came from Europe, and when Europe was the dominant area of the world. 21st century is going to be very different.
Do the Chinese have a presence in South America today and in the Caribbean?
Oh yeah, they're there looking for resources, and they're everywhere.
Friendly with Chavez?
They're friendly with whoever will give them natural resources. They have a huge population that they've got to support.
I was in Bogota about 3 months ago and sniffing around for Chinese and talking to people who know that whole part of the world.
And how were they regarded?
I don't see that many Chinese.
No.
Well, you may not see
I'd like
that
to know
many.
what the facts are.
The Brazilians are unhappy with them too, because the Chinese are getting very bellicose, John, and very demanding, and the Brazilians are unhappy with them, and a lot of people are.
I just wonder. I wonder when sort of the empire gets to stop expanding. In other words, we keep putting soldiers in new places. We've had the people in Japan since World War II. We have the 30,000 in North Korea. Germany, we're not shrinking our bases there. In other words, we keep adding new bases, and if this is because the geopolitical world is realigning, why doesn't that ever mean that we get to build down other places? We get to bring home when there's a war, Iraq, Afghanistan, but we just keep expanding and expanding and expanding. And the word for this is imperial overstretch. I don't know that Australia is a mistake, but I do know we expand and we never contract.
Do you think that causes an equal and opposite reaction on the part of the Chinese? That we are the expanding entity in the world. We're all over.
I've always said that. But they too are expanding. They're looking for opportunities around the world.
So what?
You know,
they're in Africa
It
too?
sounds almost, absolutely. They've been in Africa. I ran into them when I was there back in the 70s. The fact is, China, even though we call them communists, but they're really, state-sponsored capitalism is what it is. They are, it's the state runs enterprise, essentially, and so they operate around the world in much the same way the old colonial
This is a point well taken. The
know-
Chinese embassy in town and other Chinese around the country, you ask them about what kind of philosophy how would they describe it today? You know what they call it? They call it market socialism.
I know.
Market socialism.
Hey, John,
I've been there. I know. You're right.
John, where they made a
They
mistake.
will not use the word communist,
That's
nor
what
will
it
they acknowledge that they're communist.
They don't use capitalism and they don't use communism, and they are trying to find something in
Market
between.
socialism.
John,
Not
but where
the
Tim
other.
is exactly right is this. The Chinese, with this bellicosity, and, you get out of this waters, get out of those are our territorial waters. They've given Obama and the Americans an opportunity to re-up and get back into Asia full speed, and the United States, which was withdrawing, is probably going to stop withdrawing. I agree with him.
Well,
I think we got to downsize it and tell those countries, you take care of yourselves. The Chinese are your problem in the South China Sea. You negotiate with them, and if they take over the whole South China Sea, that is your problems, not ours.
You want to solve this problem by a de facto acquiescence to what the Chinese are telling us to do?
No, they're not telling us this to do. They are telling us to get out of it. I would send the fleet in there still and maintain our rights, but what I wouldn't do is start building up new bases.
Exit question. There you are. He's turned on us.
That's called having your cake and eat it too.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
you
right.
can't let them throw you out of a territory, international
You're
waters.
just arguing
He
against
thinks
yourself.
He's going through his Kissinger phase. Exit question. Assign a letter grade A to F to Obama's Asian summitry. Pat Buchanan.
I would give him a B+ for what he wants to do, but I'm not sure it's the right thing for what America should do.
It's an A+ for his summitry and for U.S. national interests. We've been a Pacific power since 1942, and we shouldn't be turning around and going home now.
Did he have a preliminary agenda?
His preliminary agenda is job creation. These are huge markets over there as well.
Did he set it in advance?
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
He's been transparent about what he wants and what he
Was the summit
accomplished.
full of successes?
You've just named two of them.
Concrete results, let's
Right,
say.
absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you give him?
I'll give him a B. He also handed out a big subsidy to Boeing when he was out there in Bali, so they could, sell a jet to Bali. I don't like that sort of thing, so he loses some points for that.
Wait a minute. Boeing is in the United States.
Yeah, Boeing
in
is
Washington,
selling an
state of
airplane to
Washington.
them, and so
they're also setting up a plant in Mississippi.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're
No,
building
it's
some of these
bad for Obama to give an award to
I
Boeing, an American
believe,
corporation.
I believe in the free market and not in subsidies.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with the Chinese.
No, this has to do with Obama. He went over there and handed out a subsidy.
He gets an A. Obama's done very well in foreign policy. You can tell by the fact that he's made so few headlines at it lately. And it's not his headache is that his foreign policy successes are having almost no impact on his approvals as far as going into this next election.
He obviously gets an A for all of the cited reasons that were given by Eleanor Clift a moment ago under the extraction of McLaughlin. You got it? Issue 2, Super Committee Showdown.
The clock is running out, but it hasn't run out yet. We still have time, but we have no time to waste.
Pennsylvania Republican Senator Pat Toomey is a member of the Debt Reduction Super Committee. The Super Committee was created by Congress in August with one task: cut the U.S. national debt, now at $15 trillion, over the next 10 years by at least $1.2 trillion. 12 members sit on the Super Committee panel. 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats. Senate Republicans Kyle, Portman, Toomey. House Republicans Hensarling, Camp, Upton. Senate Democrats Borkus, Kerry, Murray. House Democrats Becerra, Clyburn, Van Holland. A simple majority of this 12-member Super Committee, 7 out of 12, must vote yes on the Super Committee bill by November 23rd, this coming Wednesday, so it can reach the full Congress for a final vote. But even if Congress fails to pass the bill, get this, it makes no difference because an automatic trigger will go into effect. That means if Congress votes no, the national debt will still be reduced through automatic cuts worth $1.2 trillion. Half of those cuts would come from defense, half from domestic programs, including Medicare. Many believe that the Super Committee will not reach its Thanksgiving Eve deadline. Why? Taxes. Democrats don't want a deal that doesn't include tax increases. They want to boost government revenues. Republicans don't want a deal that includes tax increases. They argue that corporate taxes suck capital away from businesses that would otherwise hire new workers.
Question: how much has the national debt risen since President Obama took office 3 years ago?
John, there's been 3 straight deficits of $1.3 trillion. My guess is it's about $4 trillion, and by the time he runs for re-election, it'll be $5 trillion.
Let me hear the numbers again. The billion?
No, I said
1.3
trillion average deficit for 3 years is about $4 trillion, and it'll be $1 trillion more.
What's the percentage increase under Obama?
Almost 50.
Almost 50%.
It was about 10 trillion.
No, it's
and
closer
now
to about 40%.
Yeah, but he
got
a pretty good head start with George W. Bush, with 2 wars that weren't paid for, a prescription drug plan that wasn't paid for, and huge tax cuts that we couldn't afford when we passed them. We certainly can't afford them now. Let's put that in context.
When Bush took office, the public debt was $5.7 trillion.
Public debt?
The public debt.
That's different from the national debt, you know.
The national debt. The national debt. You don't permit the interchange, but everybody else does. The national debt was what, 5.7 trillion?
The national debt was 10 trillion. It's now 15 trillion. The 50% increase is exactly right, John. The public debt is what is held by corporations, foreign countries, sovereign funds, individuals, guys like Clarence who got it in their retirement account.
In Bush's 8 years, the debt increased. It almost doubled. Did it not?
Yeah, but it was probably from 5 trillion to 10 trillion.
That's correct.
Yes. And now it's gone up from about 10 to about 15 trillion.
The
Super Committee's talk of 1.2 trillion in deficit reduction over a decade is less than 10%. What is that? 8% of over the course of a decade.
Yeah, so the Republicans are arguing among themselves as to whether they can break this no tax pledge that was put out in the mid-90s by Grover Norquist. Right. And Pat Toomey, who was former president of the Club for Growth, an anti-tax guy who's on the Super Committee, put forth a plan that volunteered $300 billion in increased tax revenues. And everybody said, ooh, he's crossed some of the lines that he wasn't supposed to. But if you look at the plan closely, he puts the $300 billion on the table, and then he takes back a lot more by reducing the top rate to 28%. And all the other deficit committees started out by eliminating the Bush tax cuts for the very rich. So we're back again to a fight over the Bush tax cuts.
Is the problem a bipartisan problem. That is, it was created by the two parties.
Yes.
Yes.
It's bipartisan, is it not?
Yes.
Doesn't that tell you something from the word go?
What
we
does it
are,
tell you,
we
John?
are a spendthrift. We have a spendthrift nation,
That's
and
right.
we got a spendthrift Congress, and we can only blame ourselves.
Yeah, but we're going to have our credit rating downgraded, and borrowing money is going to be a lot more expensive. This is really courting disaster if they don't come up with an agreement.
Right.
We are headed for a day of reckoning, no doubt. I don't think they're going to get any agreement, even if they get it in the super committee. I don't think it'll go through the Congress. The decision's going to come in the election of 2012, and if Obama's reelected, I think we're Italy.
But if Mitt
We're going to have
Romney-
another. We'll have a deadlock for 4 years.
But you're right, though. It's gonna be decided
Silvio's
in the next
gone.
election.
Berlusconi.
But you're right, though.
Issue 3, Newt nicked.
When they walked in and said to me, we are now making loans to people who have no credit history and have no record of paying back anything, but that's what the government wants us to do. As I said to them at the time, this is a bubble. This is insane.
Republican presidential contender Newt Gingrich became embroiled this week in a controversy involving the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, a.k.a. Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac buys mortgages from banks and sell them to investors as securities. That frees up capital for banks to issue more mortgages, namely long-term fixed-interest rate mortgages. What's the connection with Gingrich? Gingrich worked for 6 years with high-level officials at Freddie Mac. Gingrich was paid to coach Freddie Mac officials on how to talk to conservative lawmakers to garner their support to keep Freddie Mac alive. Gingrich's total compensation for his services to Freddie ranged between $1.6 and $1.8 million. Gingrich says he acted as an advisor to Freddie Mac, but never lobbied lawmakers on Freddie Mac's behalf.
Offered strategic advice over a long period of time.
Now, some of it was aimed at how do you explain what you're doing and how you're doing it. But I did no lobbying of any kind.
Critics accuse Gingrich of political hypocrisy for taking money from Freddie Mac as a private citizen and then blaming Freddie Mac for causing the housing crisis when he was a presidential candidate. Others accuse Gingrich of using his political experience, namely 4 years as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, to cash in. So says Washington Examiner columnist Tim Carney. Quote, this cavalier attitude towards the monetization of public service will likely irritate conservatives who fume at the cronyism and corporatism of the Obama administration. Republicans won't rally behind another politician who confuses free enterprise with getting rich, unquote.
Connie, are you prepared to live by your imputed statement there?
Absolutely, and Newt's statement that he never did lobbying doesn't hold up to any normal definition of the word lobbying. I've been talking to Republican Hill staffers who were there in 2003 while Newt was being paid by drug companies, and they were saying he was rallying Republicans to vote for the prescription drug bill that the drug company supported. So he didn't register as a lobbyist, but what he did, by any normal definition of the word, was lobbying. And he was lobbying for corporate welfare in Freddie Mac, in the drug stuff, and in ethanol. And that's one reason why
he didn't do anything illegal, I'm sure, and he stayed on the opposite side of being a registered lobbyist. But the problem is that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have been turned into this big devil by the right, and it turns out that he's been in bed with them. He wants Chris Dodd and Barney Frank, who chaired the banking committees in the Senate and the House. He said they should go to jail for being in bed with Freddie Mac. Well, it was a crowded bed because Gingrich was there as well.
Wait a minute.
John, let me say something about this.
Is there any legal rap that would stand up in court against
No, she just said
it,
that. It's
no,
not.
it's not criminal.
She said that. Are you saying that?
The only you never get prosecuted for violating the Lobbying Disclosure Act. If he spent more than 20% of his time lobbying, yes, I don't think that's the issue.
It's illegal not to register as a lobbyist if you are provably, in fact, lobbying.
You have to spend 20% or more of your time on lobbying activities.
But John, and was he able to deny that truthfully?
He did so much. He was teaching history classes, I'm sure.
As a cover?
That's the point, John.
What?
You're missing the point. Newt wasn't on their payroll to do strict lobbying, so to speak. He was mainly there to help to ease the way toward contacts on Capitol Hill and enhance Fannie and Freddie's image
Is
overall.
that okay?
And that's what Democrats have done too. Bill Daley and
John,
Rahm
John, when you put
Emanuel,
one,
You mean
others.
without declaring
The fact
themselves to
is-
be lobbyists?
See, you're trying to make a criminal case, John. We're in a political campaign. That's what's important here.
exactly.
You see, and Tim is exactly right. They have made a bête noire out of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac all these years, and this is not new. This is the thing. You see, because Kane's campaign suddenly collapsed, now a lot of his supporters are looking to figure out where to go, and they kind of forgot why they didn't go for Newt in the first place, and now
John,
here
let me
they are
get-
back
wait,
with
wait,
Newt.
let me get into this, John.
Wait a minute. We're going to clear something up here, and that is the judicial aspect. That is the legal aspect.
there isn't
of
any
lobbying.
criminal. There's no criminal.
There's
no
no
criminal
criminal.
problem here.
No,
All right.
Let me
Is
say
it, a
this.
civil, is it a civil problem?
When you're
Can
giving,
you go to jail?
When
No.
you're
No.
paying
No.
Newt Gingrich $1.6 million, you're not buying strategic advice. You're buying Newt.
Right,
And that's
right.
exactly what they did, John. I don't think there's any criminal liability. I agree with the lobbying law.
You mean they
provision.
wanted to buy off Newt?
No, they
He's
wanted to
doing-
buy Newt. We want a guy to give us entree to all these other guys to make our case here
Get
and there.
conservative cred.
Get conservatives to go along with big government.
What about the theory of that? Did that work, in fact?
Well, it worked. It definitely
Newt
worked
has
on
name
Medicare Part
value.
D. It won over lots of reluctant conservatives on the Medicare drug bill.
He's doing what a lot of people in Washington do, and it's what the rest of the country hates. So he becomes a symbol of
I
what
don't
he's
know whether
allegedly
this-
running against.
I don't know whether this is reductively a cover-up or an expose. Issue 4. Arrivederci Silvio.
Hanno esultato per quella che definiscono la mia uscita di scena. Voglio dire con grande chiarezza che da domani raddoppierò il mio impegno in Parlamento e nelle istituzioni per rinnovare l'Italia.
Italy's Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi resigned this week, bringing to an end an historic 17-year political career. For 11 of those 17 years, Berlusconi served 3 terms as Italy's Prime Minister. He agreed to step down if the Italian legislature passed measures to bring down Italy's $2.6 trillion public debt. That $2.6 trillion debt is larger than the total Italian GDP, $2.1 trillion. But the 75-year-old former prime minister is still Italy's prime media mogul, with 3 national television stations, a publishing house, an advertising agency, and at least 2 newspapers. Forbes magazine sets his net wealth at $8 billion. His critics fault the former prime minister on several counts. Item: media dominance. Berlusconi was accused of using his media to inflate his bio. Item: business corruption. Berlusconi has been accused of tax fraud, false accounting, and bribery. Item: liaison dangereuse. Mr. Berlusconi is currently on trial for allegedly paying for sex with an underage woman who denies any such arrangement. But supporters of Berlusconi say that he has brought one major benefit to Italian politics: political stability. Berlusconi was the nation's longest-serving prime minister after World War II. Before Berlusconi came to power, the average lifespan of an Italian premiership was less than a year.
Question: will Italy's sovereign debt crisis define Berlusconi's political legacy? I ask you, Tim.
I think the debt crisis is amazing, as we saw in those numbers, but as was his record with the women, is probably what people will remember long after that. Unless, of course, it is Rome that sort of fittingly brings down Europe. If Europe collapses, I think Berlusconi could become a curse word. If this is just Italy collapsing, you know, it would be a different story.
You know, the lady involved, she denies the legitimacy.
But there are many other ladies besides the one lady that you put up on that screen.
Right.
Oh, well,
I mean, that was the illegal one.
Actually, scandal will define his legacy, but it will be really almost with a smile, because throughout all of this, he's been amazingly popular in Italy, and he survived a no-confidence vote. He still leads the largest party in Parliament, so he can still play a role as they go forward. And the irony is that he was brought down by the markets, who he has had such faith in. I mean, he's the ultimate capitalist, and it was their their decision rendered on him that forced him to step down.
Let me make a small point here. This was not continuous service on Berlusconi's part, these multiple terms. There was space in between. So the Italians had the opportunity to think it through again, but they kept putting him back and taking him out of retirement and reinstalling him to office. Does that carry an additional meaning?
That's a very good point, John.
It is a good point?
It is an
Why
excellent,
is it a good point, Pat?
Because if the people had him in there and saw what he was doing and knew who he was and put him back in there, it speaks to the character of the Italian nation. He's going to be a disaster for this reason. This 120% of GDP debt is going to bring Italy down. It's going to bring the Eurozone, the entire Eurozone down. I don't know about the EU itself. But in these women and all this other, it's a metaphor for the corruption of the West, John.
But
this man.
Is Italy on the brink of an economic precipice?
It's going to bring down the Eurozone, and we're going to get back an Italian lira.
Well, everybody loves a rascal until when times are good, when times are hard, they turn against him. And Berlusconi built up nice coalitions, helped along by being the media magnet of the country. But even the Catholic Church, which he had curried favor with for a long time, turned against him here amid the money crisis. So sex is one thing, the money is another. And that's what brought him down.
Oh, wait a minute. You're telling me the Catholic Church follows the money?
No, I'm saying that they saw the money crisis going on. So everybody turned against Berlusconi, including the church, because he had been he had pressed for the social conservative issues that the church wanted.
Do you think this, in combination with the Greek disaster?
Italy could come apart. You've got the Northern Alliance over there, the Lega Nord, which is trying to break away. You have this whole thing collapse. His country could come apart.
What's the total impact of that region, including Greece, and the problems in Germany and elsewhere having on the U.S. economy?
That will be, Obama will not be reelected if the euro goes down.
Predictions, Pat.
Major foreign policy issue of the 2012 campaign will be, should we go to war with Iran?
Eleanor.
Newt Gingrich won't win Iowa, but he will get one of the 3 tickets to go on to New Hampshire coming out of Iowa.
Tim.
I think Ron Paul will get one of the 3 tickets to come out of New Hampshire, to come out of Iowa into New Hampshire.
A new insider trading ban on Congress is a sleeper issue that's going to come awake in the next year.
Vladimir Putin is Prime Minister of Russia now. He will run to become president in March, and he will win, and it's a 6-year term. Bye-bye.
Does he have an opponent?